to today's webinar.
Right, thanks, Chris. So to sum it all up, what are the key takeaways and how can we really make a good thing better? So Eugene Toinstra said that we have to start and also not only applying A-CDM, but also educating senior management on what the actual benefits of A-CDM are. Because only if senior management is really convinced, it will also trickle down the whole organization. Another thing, and that goes in line with this, is to really make A-CDM better in the future. You also have to focus on the change management aspect of A-CDM. It is not a product, which I very much liked from Chris de Bolle. It's not a product like your Microsoft Office installation. It is a process. IT supports it, but it is overall a process. You also have to make more, or you have to get more out of your A-CDM data, analyze it, find the potential for process optimization, and through this really go and unlock the ROI. I also think, and this is a very strong feeling of mine, that today this is not done to the fullest extent. You also should adapt the A-CDM for a situation such as the one we are currently facing. And the A-CDM concept right now is primarily adopted by larger airports, and it could provide a lot of valuable information, a lot of valuable inputs if it would also be adopted by smaller and regional airports on a larger scale. You can also, or we as an industry should go and use technology in the future to make A-CDM more reliable, more predictable. So use automated predicted milestones that are more accurate than they are today. And especially, and I think that is a very important thing, our industry is prone to still have a lot of manual processes, and these are the ones we definitely have to get rid of. And last but not least, as Chris just said, we have to work on a much more granular milestone basis for the future, so that we can track much more processes and optimize these processes accordingly. So that's it from our side. The floor is now open for questions and answers. And there is actually already a very interesting question. And I'm glad this person already asked the question last webinar, so I had a chance to train his name. It's from Shremek from Toronto. So his question is, TOBT monitoring. Are any European A-CDM airports tracking targeted off-block time quality? And if so, what is the target percentage and logic used, such as T-5, T-10, T-15 minutes from final TOBT posted? So maybe we first answer this part and then the second part of his question.
Shall I?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I am not aware of massive TOBT quality reporting and sharing. I do know that most airports have their own internal monitoring and reporting of a number of key performance indicators. What should happen is that Eurocontrol and perhaps ANSPs in the nations take the lead and demand transparency of reporting in order to start have a discussion on quality. What is quality? What are standardized metrics and key performance indicators in order to start steering on the right level? Eurocontrol has taken the lead long time ago, implementing and rolling out, even mandating airport CDM. I think Eurocontrol, in Europe at least, is the right stakeholder to start mandating reporting and standardizing, harmonizing that reporting on KPIs like the TOBT.
Thanks, Eugene. The second part of the question is related to COVID. So if these metrics, or if the TOBT metric or any other metrics, the question is, are they affected by COVID due to airline or ground agent staffing levels? Eugene or anyone else?
Eugene Lehmann, would you like to take this?
Yeah. I'm thinking about giving an answer, but not sure what to answer. So let me think again.
Okay, then I would say let's come back to this question in a minute. François Chazelle also has a very interesting question. Maybe Chris Hin, for you. Thanks for the presentation. Good point from Christian about including turnaround milestones. How about adding taxiing milestones using ground radar data?
Yeah, good point. I'm pretty sure there's value there as well. I think what could be a challenge is each airport obviously different. Each taxiway system is different. Could be a challenge to find generic milestones if you want to, standardize this across the board, which would be beneficial. On an airport level, you can of course always do it, but I think in general that's the ground radar data or data from flight radar 24, for example. There's so much opportunity in this data as well, from many aspects. So like real time, right? Like how can actually a runway incursion still happen? You can ask yourself, because you can actually, based on ground radar data, you can predict the path of a vehicle or an aircraft. And therefore, if you also have real time data available about what's your current runway usage, which runways are active, you can basically predict runway incursions. Does it matter? Does it mean you will always get it right 100%? Probably not, but it's much better than what we have today. So I think, in a real-time environment, you can actually use ground radar data for a lot of interesting use cases, also related to safety, but also to, queuing times, taxi queuing times. But also, if you take the historical data, again, back to Cristobal's point, analyze this data, and where airports usually today have sort of standard maintenance plans, regardless of how the infrastructure is being used, if you have ground radar data or flight radar 24 data, you actually have data about how your infrastructure is being used. So why fix a piece of tarmac that has been used only 10% as much as another piece of tarmac, right? So you can actually adopt and make your maintenance schedules relative to the usage of that infrastructure. So yeah, don't get me started. There's a ton of interesting things to do with that as well.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that not only milestones is of interesting to monitor this, but also just collecting data. At Eurocontrol now we have a project running to consider to install ADS-B receivers on various regional airports, because we lack information, we lack data. Why would Eurocontrol or the network manager do that? Because we want to have a better quality of information about moving aircraft. A good example is before COVID hit the airports, we started to have a project for the Greek islands. They have big issues with capacity, but also sharing information. To know that even today that the air traffic controllers, which they have a lack of tools in their little APC towers, they just phone up to Athens when an aircraft is airborne. I mean, this is not of how you manage data these days. So automation can play a big role here. And don't get me wrong, even at CDM airport, there are a lot to be won. Eurocontrol, you might be aware, they have offices quite close to Brussels Airport. So what we did is we put a ADS-B antenna on the roof of the Eurocontrol building, and we compared the CDM information with the ADS-B information. And to our surprise, we came to some interesting deviations. For instance, that The arrival and departure at the gate was a difference of something between 3 and 4 minutes. That doesn't sound a lot, but it is a lot. So there's a lot of to be won with collecting and to improve on the quality of data.
Thanks. Thanks.
And coming back on Premik's question regarding KPIs that he's expected to see to improve. Reduced flight demands, I would think, result in reduced delays, less fuss going on in the turnaround phase. So I would expect to see improvement on adherence KPIs, TOBT, TSAT, and TTOT adherence.
All right. Cool, thanks. There's one question from Richard Brook. Who should drive A-CDM implementation and enabling technology? Should it be the airlines? Should it be the airports or the handlers? And who should pay for the cost? He appreciates the logic for the long-term savings.
Maybe I can give an answer there. I think, first of all, managers should drive from a cost perspective, whether from any organization, the need for more efficiency and predictability. They should do that by education, learning what can be gained in their organization, and discuss with colleagues, management, how they can improve efficiency, reduce cost at the airport of interest. And that's where it starts. Typically, we see airports leading the projects and the initiatives. However, we see ANSP, and in Europe, especially Eurocontrol, a main driver of implementation and connection to the network manager of airport CDM airports, because they need that predictability in the network in their airspace. So whilst ANSPs are a driver, it should also be airlines, airports, together with the ground handlers that would say, hey, let's improve and reduce costs at our local airport. It should be a driver from all. Typically, the cost can be even subsidized. Sometimes we have a lot of projects that are subsidized by the European Commission or European Union. We see that the airport does a lot, but also ANSPs often take costs, whilst the other stakeholders need to provide resources in terms of project partnerships, so human resources.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency outside of the Eurocontrol influence zone. I think there's a tendency for the airport operators to take the lead. I've always been slightly disappointed in the fact that the handling agents are quite invisible when it comes to A-CDM implementation, although they play a pivotal role in A-CDM, specifically on the key, their responsibility on the key milestone like TOBTs, for instance.
All right. Thanks a lot for your responses. We got another question from Isaac Prabhu. He is visiting us today, or he's attending today from India. And his question is, most of our Indian airports are having night parking constraints. Since now all the aircrafts are grounded, the parking bays are occupied. How or what technique can be adopted through A-CDM which can help in accommodating the rising aircraft movements? And how precisely can we ask our stakeholders to tune their TOBT and TSAT?
So maybe I can give an initial reaction on this question. Like in the end of the day, if there's not enough stands to park the planes, then there's not enough stands to park the planes, right? But the question is often like, do you even know, or does the industry even know how many stands there are, how many planes there are, when they come, when they leave? So if there's not enough infrastructure, there's not enough infrastructure, it's clear. But if there is enough infrastructure, then you need to be as efficient in your planning and as optimal in your allocation of the resource, because otherwise you might need 1.5 times the capacity or the resources to accommodate the same amount of aircraft. And that's exactly, we see massive infrastructure expansion projects at airports. while they haven't fully utilized the existing infrastructure. And if you see the cost of these expansion projects, then it should be not too difficult to make a business case, back to the previous point, to actually say, you know, we need to invest in a better visibility of what's actually going on, so we can actually use the assets that we have to the fullest.
Maybe I can answer the second part of the question on the TOBT.
Yes, please go
and
ahead.
the TSAT. In various projects, we see that the accuracy of the TOBT should not go beyond 5 minutes accuracy. When an airline or ground handler tries to update with 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, that typically does not add to the predictability for other stakeholders, such as the ANSP, air traffic control in the tower, who would like to have this TOBT, or the network manager. For the TOBT, a minimum of 5 minutes is recommended in order to be accurate. For the TSAT, of course, it might be different. TSAT is often related to CTOT constraints from the network manager, or the congestion at the airport, or the takeoff time even at the runway. Typically, ATC could generate times based on minutes accuracy, yet that depends again on the airport. Whether it's a large airport like Schiphol or Heathrow, it might be the granularity of minutes. In regional airports, where there is often sufficient capacity, typically that is not so much the case. A larger granularity is upheld. But with CTOTs from the network manager, often the difference is the taxi time, and that could be on minutes.
All right. Thank you very much. Wow, I'm really thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. We get more and more questions. I think it's great. One here from Hamid Janua. To predict off-block through machine learning or AI, so the predicted off-block time, what data sources are required?
I think data that most of the airports have in-house is a good starting point. So for many of our customers, we start with creating an off-block time predictor based on general AODB data. Now, we have the advantage that we've developed these models already by doing this for different airports and different kinds of configurations. But it's a good starting point, and every time we've done it, that has already proven to be more accurate than TOBT. Now, it's not always more is better, but there's a lot more data points that can help. So you can imagine, as I said in the presentation, in a typical AODB data set, you'll have in-block, off-block, but in between limited data available. So if you start filling that gap and start getting information, if fueling has happened, how long catering is underway, if the loading has been completed, like it enriches the capability of the predictor to be more accurate, especially if you move closer towards the actual off-block time. But you can think even much further. Like if you know for a specific flight how many people have passed through security already, that's also an interesting factor. Or how many, where are you in terms of boarding? Are you at 50% or at 80% of boarding completion? And what about the bags coming from your baggage handling system? For that specific flight, how many of the bags that you expect have already been delivered to the carousels or laterals? So there is really a large amount of data sources that can ultimately make your predictor extremely accurate, but with very limited data that everyone has available, you can already outperform the manual alternative.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Then Eugene Toinstra, you wanted to answer the question from Fernando Santillan. Based on your experience, what kind of data or indicators obtained from the A-CDM approach can help in the recovery process of the industry?
I think in general, it starts with the basic indicators that are key for CDM and predictability. That means the TTOT, the target takeoff time, and the TSAT and the TOBT remain the most important parameters. Yet there will be disruption in the turnaround process due to longer boarding processes or deboarding processes, there may be disruptions. So those disruptions all are represented again in the TUBT. So how much updates there are, is there automation? Can we improve that process, as Christian will advocate? That is critical in order to monitor the quality here. But in theory, the disruption of the industry that we see today should not lead to different metrics or indicators, although there can be additional. I think the most important is that you apply the existing ones more accurately, and everybody starts focusing on that and realize the value of monitoring by evaluation and feedback and action based on poor performance.
Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, there was another question. There was another question from Fernando. It's in the chat box, I believe. He looked for. Hang on a second. Just reread. Fernando is counting on A-CDM to improve slot adherence. I think you're very right in that statement. This will definitely, A-CDM will definitely help to enhance your slot adherence. But I can only recommend you to start during your A-CDM implementation to set up a performance reporting framework in which this the behavior and the slot compliance is measured beyond implementation to make sure that you see the trends and that you can set up an action plan if things go wrong.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Yes. Then there's one more question from Patrick Lau. Smart airport topic is quite popular in aviation now. How can AI or other technologies improve the accuracy of milestones of A-CDM, such as TUBT? I question any video analysis can help on this topic. Any limitation and concerns we need to consider? Chris, I think that's your topic.
I'd be very happy to show you someday, Patrick. Like we've done the experiments on live data sets multiple times. So we actually know it can help. We can show you exactly how much it can help. So that's basically all I can say. So happy to follow up with you on that and show you a bit more detail.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe I can also say a little bit here. It's basically, if it is video analysis or any other kind of neutral and objective input, basically has the most important benefit of having this always available and 100% unambiguous. We all know that when you are working on the ground, it can become very difficult to keep track of going forward with your processes and so on, and you might miss updating the TUBT, you might miss updating a timestamp. I think that's one of the key aspects, that using modern technology such as computer vision, this is no longer the case. And with this, you can really improve the overall result.